Have you ever been completely derailed by a comment online and just thought, wait, is this person actually trying to make a point, or are they literally just trying to ruin my day? It is incredibly easy to confuse the two, right? Because on the surface, they look so similar. Both critics and trolls can sound super hostile, sarcastic, or aggressive, but using tone alone to diagnose them is a massive mistake. As this quote perfectly captures, a surgeon and a mugger both cut people open, but the relationship to the outcome couldn't be more different. Welcome to This Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here, because today we are going to break down the actual structural realities of online toxicity. We're going to look at the anatomy of a troll, why digital platforms are practically designed from the ground up to breed them, and most importantly, how you can survive and navigate these interactions without, completely losing your mind. So here is our roadmap for today. We're looking at 1. Critics versus trolls. 2. The architecture of outrage. 3. The restatement test. And 4. How to actually handle trolls. Let's dive right into section 1, critics versus trolls. To put this in perspective, some digital discourse studies actually suggest that up to 30% of engagements on controversial topics exhibit trolling markers, like attacking identity and harvesting outrage. That is wild compared to the tiny fraction that qualify as genuine, evidence-based critique. Now, a critic might genuinely dislike you. They might even really enjoy defeating you in a debate. But they are tethered to the subject matter. They actually consume your material, they refer to specifics, and they attack your claims. A troll proper, on the other hand, they just want to damage and derail. They don't have ideological consistency. They have hostility consistency. If the exact opposite narrative becomes more useful for an attack tomorrow, the troll is going to switch sides without a single second of psychological discomfort. To a troll, facts aren't commitments. They're just ammunition. I want you to reflect on your own online interactions for a second here. Think about that emotional footprint left behind after a heated argument. Engaging with a critic often produces irritation, right? It forces cognitive labor and defensive reflection. You might feel mentally exhausted, but you usually walk away conceptually clearer. Engaging with a troll, though, leads to a totally different kind of exhaustion and confusion. It feels like atmospheric contamination, like dumping ink into a glass of water. Everybody just becomes hyperreactive, and visibility drops to zero. You don't feel wiser. You just feel kind of dirtier. And that really highlights the ultimate difference in their utility. A critic produces heat and light. They act like sandpaper. And yeah, for sure, the friction is abrasive, but it sharpens your argument. It shows you exactly where your evidence is missing or where your language is getting sloppy. The troll, however, produces only heat. They act like acid. They corrode the discussion entirely, just collapsing the whole shebang into emotional combat. All right, moving on to section 2, the architecture of outrage. Let's pull back the curtain on the mechanical and economic realities of the attention economy. Social media platforms unintentionally reward troll behavior because outrage scales significantly better than nuance. Just look at the alignment here. Platforms want rapid emotional activation, so trolls use tactics like, quote, dunking to trigger massive algorithmic amplification. Platforms tap into tribal psychology, so the troll uses binary moral geometry, basically labeling everything as strictly good or evil, ally or enemy, just to gain high visibility. And because attention is the literal currency of the internet, harvesting outrage is highly, highly profitable. Think about it. Trolls generate the absolute highest rate of time on site and endless reply chains. If you're a platform selling ad space, a nuanced agreement is a dead end. But a venomous, never-ending argument? That's a goldmine. The troll isn't a glitch in the matrix. Structurally and financially, they are the platform's ideal user. In older public discourse systems, like, say, academic journals or moderated town halls, there was built-in friction that naturally filtered out low-effort attacks. Modern platforms basically eradicated that friction. Now, anyone can throw rhetorical bricks through a window and get an audience applauding within seconds. Why? Well, because certainty spreads faster than complexity. Mockery is so much shorter than explanation. It requires absolutely zero patience or ambiguity tolerance. Just sit back and consume rage. Which brings us to this incredibly punchy, uncomfortable realization. Sometimes communities create their own trolls. Not artificially, but structurally. When a social space monetizes conflict, actively punishes nuance, and treats human attention as a traded currency, troll behavior isn't just annoying, it is a highly adaptive survival strategy. The ecosystem breeds the organism. Basically, a sewer should not be surprised by rats. Which leads us to section 3, the restatement test. Ask yourself this one very simple question. Can they accurately restate you? This is probably the single most reliable discriminator out there. Before you frantically type out some 3-paragraph defense, just stop. Reply with this specific prompt. Before I respond to your criticism, can you please summarize my core point in your own words? I promise you, their answer will tell you everything you need to know. This tactic is actually rooted in a classical philosophical concept called the principle of charity, or as it's often called today, steel manning. A genuine critic can usually restate your position in a way you recognize. It might be imperfect, but they actually know what they're attacking. They're going to state your argument in its strongest reasonable form and then systematically dismantle it. The troll does the exact opposite. They weaken first and attack second. Because they quite frankly haven't even fully read your material, they will completely refuse to restate you. Instead, they'll caricature your position, substitute in a bunch of catchphrases, or reframe your point into some morally contaminated version. Strawman construction is basically the troll's native architecture. So if they refuse the test, mock the test, or reply with a totally warped caricature of your point, boom, the test is complete. You have successfully diagnosed a troll. All right, bringing us home with Section 4, How to Handle Trolls. When you are dealing with a proper troll, boundaries matter infinitely more than persuasion. Because a troll's primary fuel is your reaction, endless rebuttal simply rewards them. Public emotionality incentivizes repetition. So your actionable steps are pretty straightforward. A brief correction of the facts, containment of the issue, an absolute refusal to spiral into some deeper argument, and finally, silence. Remember, a troll risks losing their tribal identity if they back down, so they are always going to double down. Silence is literally your best defense. Now, I want to make sure we don't swing too far in the other direction here. We absolutely must not label all disagreement as trolling. That is intellectually disastrous. If every single critic becomes a hater, society loses its ability to self-correct, and we just collapse into these awful echo chambers. Critics are refiners of thought. They are stress tests for our arguments. Think of them as accidental collaborators. As the old saying goes, a blacksmith shouldn't hate the hammer that shapes the steel. You should engage with them selectively and seriously. But for the trolls, you are under no obligation to fight. Try this. Watch what happens when you remove the audience. A genuine critic will gladly continue a discussion privately in your DMs because they actually care about the issue. A troll, they lose all their energy the absolute moment the spectacle disappears. They are only performing socially for tribal visibility and algorithmic reward. The critic seeks leverage against your argument. The troll seeks leverage against your social standing. It is an entirely different battlefield. And honestly, not every attack deserves a duel. Some people aren't there to fight honorably. They just want to overturn the table. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought. The hardest discipline for anyone navigating this digital age isn't just identifying the trolls. It's refusing to become one while fighting them. In an ecosystem meticulously designed to harvest your outrage and monetize your conflict, can you maintain your integrity? The next time you feel your blood pressure spiking online, I want you to ask yourself, are you sharpening the steel, or are you just spilling acid? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will catch you next time.